Welcome to NinjaCast, a photography podcast powered by Studio Ninja, the world's highest rated business management app, built specifically for photographers. Listen and learn as the most successful photographers on the planet share their knowledge to help you transform every element of your photography business. Here's your host, Sally Shaw.
Hi guys, welcome to NinjaCast. Today we are joined by James Broadbent, owner and photographer at Chasewild and founder of the software that we all know and love, Narrative. Sit back and listen about James's journey so far, his top tips for improving storytelling skills, how to nail your blogging technique, and how to attract your ideal client. Okay, let's get going. I can't wait to hear what James has to say. Hi James, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing, Sally?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Really well. How's things over there?
Yeah, good. We were just discussing New Zealand is basically coronavirus free, so life's pretty normal here, which feels odd but great, I guess. Yeah.
Agreed. Absolutely. So for our listeners that aren't necessarily familiar with you, if you can tell us a little bit about you and your journey so far, and what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, of course. So you may know me from a photography brand called Chasewild. I'm one of the co-founders of Chasewild, which I started with Cam. We've photographed weddings, I think, probably in 16 different countries, and have spent a lot of time traveling, working with clients in different places. I also am the co-founder of Narrative, which is a company that builds software for photographers. And we launched our blogging tool sort of just over a year now, and have had some pretty amazing growth over the last year, I guess, with like a lot of users coming on board. And we've just launched our second product, which is called Select, which is a photo culling tool that uses AI. So.
Fantastic. Amazing. And for those that aren't necessarily familiar with Narrative, Select, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Go into a little bit more detail for us?
Yeah, of course. So the first product I mentioned, Publish. Publish solves this problem that we all experience as photographers. When you try and build a really long photo blog post, it's a nightmare. You're trying to do it in WordPress or Squarespace or Wix or something like that, and then moving the images around, getting them where you want, getting your SEO correct, swapping the images out. It's all a massive headache. So Publish brings that experience offline. There's an app that you install on your computer. It allows you to build those blog posts offline and then publish them directly to your website once you're done. The next product, obviously we're very excited about Select because we've just announced it. It's still in beta. I think as of today, there's only about 200 people who are currently using it. We've had like 4,000 people request early access to the product, so that's very exciting. Select helps you find your best images from a photo shoot. It uses AI to give you warning indicators when your subjects have their eyes closed or when they're out of focus. And it's just built up from the bottom up to be incredibly fast as well. So the images can literally appear on the screen as fast as you can click. And it's all very much keyboard centered. So you should be able to do your photo selection process without ever having to touch the mouse to zoom, etc. So there's really simple things like if you want to zoom into a person's face, you just click the space bar and it just zooms you straight into that person's face. And then from there, the up and down keys will jump you across the different faces in the image. Or you can open up this face panel on the right-hand side and it just shows you like a full crop of all of the faces in the image, which is really nice when you're doing like group shots and stuff like that as well.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So where did these kind of products stem from? Obviously you've got a photography background, you're a photographer. Is that out of frustration? Is it out of you kind of thinking these products don't exist in their entirety in the market?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think like for me as a photographer, every day that I spent behind the camera, I would spend 4 behind the computer. And I used to think like, this is crazy, I get paid for the time that I'm with the client, shooting with them, and you don't really get paid for the time that you spend at the computer. It's just like lost time. And I think I had this realization that no one is really taking the professional photographer very seriously either, in terms of, a market, or building software solutions for them. And so I remember actually when we first, before we launched Publish, I reached out to a bunch of like companies that were building software for photographers. And I was like, look, like these are all the problems that photographers have. Like you should build solutions for these. And I think they all emailed back and they were like, oh yeah, those are like great ideas. I think, we'll definitely keep them on the back of the books, but like we're working on some other things right now. And I was like, no one else is going to do it. I think we should just like do it ourselves. And so that was the beginning of Narrative. And I guess like after launching Publish and having such a great response to that, I think quickly realized, look, like there's a huge market here of photographers who are in need of solutions for the workflow tools. And so that's our goal. That's why we exist. Narrative exists to empower photographers to spend more time doing what they love.
That's great. That's amazing. So really, you've kind of solved two massive bugbears, two massive problems that photographers have. Like I know myself, you shoot a wedding, you enjoy the day, and then you go, oh my God, now I've got to cull it. Like I've got thousands and thousands of images. How on earth am I going to get through them all quickly? And then after that, you've got the editing out the way, you've delivered to the couple. And then you go, oh God, I've got to blog it now.
Yeah.
So Narrative literally kind of takes all that away for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, huge pain points. I think the average photographer spends like 8 hours doing photo selection, and we want to significantly reduce that. And then blogging is just like one of those things where no one really does it because it's just it's such an annoying pain point. But it's one of the most important parts of your business because it's what I guess helps drive new inquiries and so forth for you. So.
Definitely. I'm actually lucky enough to be one of the photographers that were chosen for the beta. So I have had a play around with Select and it is phenomenal. Like I cannot believe how quick it is, the features that it has built into it that have just never existed before. And it makes choosing your images so much quicker. I called a wedding the other day in half an hour.
No.
Honestly, I just could not believe how quick it was and how
amazing.
Seamless it was. It was amazing. So yeah, I absolutely love it.
Awesome. And we obviously love hearing that feedback because that's what we're living for. That's what we're building all this for. So that's really awesome to hear.
Fantastic. Amazing. So obviously we have Narrative. Let's kind of rewind a little bit. Where did Chasewild begin? How did that all start?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Definitely, yeah. Let's go for all the detail.
I guess my passion for photography. I've always really been interested in photography, but I never really took it very serious until I think it was probably back in 2012. I was doing a trip where I traveled from India to Europe overland, and I decided that I wanted to document the trip. And so I bought an SLR, which I didn't really know how to use. And I had a friend who was a wedding photographer at the time. And I was like, what kind of lens should I buy? And he was like, oh, I really love this lens, Canon lens. It's called a 50L. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll buy that lens. And so I went traveling for 9 months and all I had was this fixed 50 millimeter lens. And pretty quickly I realized, oh my gosh, this is the worst lens ever to go traveling with because you can't shoot wide landscapes. And it's kind of a portrait lens, but it's also, kind of not. And I think the thing was actually, it was amazing because it taught me a lot about photography. It taught me to move my feet and sort of try and work out what it is that I'm trying to tell in this moment. Because you're so constrained, you really have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to capture in this moment? And so it really taught me to think about, I guess, my composition and really the story I was trying to tell in that particular place. So, so while I was traveling, I was running a blog. I was shooting every day. I was editing every day and like publishing my work. And I think that alone is like, if you're trying to get into photography, that's what you need to do. And one of my friends emailed me, they saw my Tumblr and they were like, hey, we saw your travel photos. We think they're really beautiful. Like, would you be willing to photograph our wedding? And I was like, it kind of been at the back of my mind that I would like to get into wedding photography because I had this friend who was doing it and like he seemed to be making pretty good money and like having a pretty good life. And so I was like, yeah, like I'd love to photograph. I didn't have a job. Like I was literally traveling and with a backpack. And so I came home and they were like, you know, how much do you charge to photograph a wedding? And someone had told me quite early on, you know, if you're going to ever shoot weddings, just don't be cheap because it's really hard to get out of cheap. Yeah. And so I said, I charge $2,000 to photograph a wedding. And so that's what I charged for the first wedding that I ever photographed. I mean, the photos kind of turned out all right. I guess I shared those photos online and I made like a pretty cool, I'd arrived home, I didn't have a job. I made a website and within a month I'd booked 5 other weddings. And they were all within sort of the next few months. And so I kind of like jokingly say the day I shot my first wedding was the day I became a full-time wedding photographer. But it's kind of true. Like that was what I did. And so all day, every day from them, I just taught myself everything I could about the industry. Like I moved into my parents' house and just tried to upskill myself as much as I could. And then I think a few months later, I photographed this wedding and like a bunch of things happened that are not normal, I guess. Like these wild horses turned up while we were on the photo shoot. The bride was just like the most animated, happy person in the world. It was like a DIY wedding and all the details were amazing. And so you know, I say I kind of fluked it in some senses, but I had this one wedding, and I think a lot of photographers have a similar story where there's kind of like this one wedding that gets them over the line. And it ended up getting published in a magazine here in New Zealand. And from that June to the following June, I shot about 40 weddings. And that was my first season.
Wow.
So
phenomenal.
At the same time, Cameron, who's the other half of Chasewild, was also getting into wedding photography, and we were just both eager to learn, I guess. And so he came along and photographed as many of those 40 weddings as he could, and at the same time, he had a similar amount of weddings that he had booked. So I think between us, we worked out that we probably shot about 60 weddings that summer, and we tried to do all of them together. And we had some like really silly weekends where we were in like 3 different cities on the same weekend because we were shooting Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something like that. And I remember one time I'd booked a wedding like way up north and he'd booked a wedding also kind of somewhere up north. And so like we drove up, we shot my wedding on the Friday night, and then after the wedding, you know, at like midnight, we left the wedding and we drove for like 2 hours and like got like slept, woke up the next morning, shot the wedding that he'd booked. And I think it was times like that where we were like, man, this is actually pretty awesome, like working with someone. And I think obviously like we really enjoyed learning with each other and teaching each other what we knew. And so we decided, you know what, why don't we just join our photography brands? And why don't we try and make one brand? And then all the things which we don't really like doing, which are, you know, annoying, like running a social media and answering emails and like all the drama that goes in the background of running a business, you know, we can share that load. And then I think probably one of the important decisions that we made was to not photograph weddings together as well. So if you book Chasewild, you either get Cameron or you get myself. And I think that one of the reasons, well, the main reason is because then we can be in 2 different places. We can be making, you know, twice as much income on a particular day. So that's kind of the long story of the origins of how Chasewild began. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's just kind of go back. You said that you, in your first kind of few months, your first season, that you booked 5. So, you know, you had that first wedding, you booked 5 off the back of that wedding. And then all of a sudden in the first year, you're transported to like 40 to 60 weddings. Do you think that was just consistency? Do you think that was just because you were constantly putting yourself out there, updating, blogging? What do you put that down to?
I mean, the wedding industry is like, I know people don't want to hear this, but the wedding industry was a little bit different, like, you know, 6 years ago. There was a lot less people in there who had taste. So, you know, like, especially you look at a lot of really successful wedding photographers who started at a similar era to us, and you go, you know, how did they do so well so early? Actually, part of it is just because there weren't many really like quality wedding photographers at the time, and there was this massive change happening in wedding photography. You know, like not long before that, people didn't even really like turn up for the morning to photograph it. You know, a wedding photographer was someone who turned up for, you know, the ceremony and maybe a photo shoot afterwards. And then there was this big change, and wedding photography became, you know, a storytelling documentary kind of photographer. And so I think that's part of it. Yeah, I think a big part of it was just focusing on building a quality website that drove a lot of leads, creating good SEO, running social well. I mean, we run workshops and we spend a lot of time talking about how to do business well. And like, I very comfortably will say, I think one of the reasons why we did really well is not because we're really talented photographers, but because we understand how to run a business well. And I think that's where a lot of photographers struggle, you know, because you love photography. It's an art, it's an expression of, you know, who you are, but actually like running a business is hard. And
absolutely.
Running a photography business is hard because you've got to do everything. You need to know, like, you need to know about, obviously not just like the art of what you're creating. You need to know how to like close a deal. You need to know how to run a website, do SEO, do your accounting, do some editing, and like you need to be a whiz on your computer because there's all these different tools you need to use. You need to like understand tech. Like it's pretty challenging thing to be doing. So
definitely, I think people fall in love with the photography, don't they? You know, it's so easy to go, I want to be a photographer. I want to go out. I want to shoot whatever I want to shoot: weddings, portraits, families, events. And I think people really easily forget that there's so much that goes on underneath all of that, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, not to bring it back to narrative, but that's what we're trying to change, right? Like, so there's all this time that you have to spend at the computer, and trying to just give photographers back a little bit more time, I guess. Yeah,
definitely. And that's absolutely what it does, 100%. I mean, I've been using Publish a little over a year now, and that was a game changer for me. I hated blogging. I will openly say it was the whole bit of the business that I loathed, and I dreaded it. And I remember there was a whole year once that I didn't blog, because I hated it that much. It was, you'd sit there, you'd get writer's block. I wouldn't know what images to put where. And then I came across Publish and I was like, game changer, sorted. Like, I don't hate it anymore. And then obviously Select has just taken it to a whole new level. So that's incredible. So obviously we've covered Chasewild. So we're going to bridge the gap a little bit here. What was the catalyst from being a photographer at Chasewild with Cam, and then you go in, okay, let's do narrative?
Yeah. So I guess I sort of touched on that with the beginning of Publish, and me sort of like emailing a bunch of companies that build software and realizing that actually no one else is going to do this unless I do. And so Stefan, who's the co-founder of Narrative, is a good friend of mine and a software developer. And I was like, look, I'm gonna like go out and try and find someone who can build this. And he was like, well, I could probably build it. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. And that was kind of the beginning of Narrative. And yeah, I mean, we were fortunate in that we grew quite early, quite quickly. And so we've been able to employ some really talented software developers. We're now a team of 11, and I think by the end of the year we'll be 20. We're currently hiring for like 8 different roles. And so there's been a massive change in my life, and I don't think I've come to terms with it yet, because like pre-Narrative, I used to work for myself and come to work when I wanted, and spend a lot of the year traveling, and my schedule was how I wanted it to be, I guess, and now soon to be a 20-person team, and they call me the CEO, and and like that's a pretty big change. And so I would say life is very different now. I still photograph weddings. I had about 5 booked over the summer, just gone. And I think I had not quite that many booked for the coming summer, but everything's kind of, well, I'm sure they'll be rebooked, but they were all sort of like postponed.
Yeah.
You still can't fly in and out of New Zealand without going through a 2-week quarantine. And so although like life is pretty normal here, there's a lot of people still are canceling their weddings because their family can't come back for weddings and stuff. So yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously that title, CEO, that's insane, isn't it? Like, do you feel like that's just been placed upon you and it's not kind of settled yet, even though you went through the process of, as needing this software and how you were going to build it and that whole journey? Does it still feel quite surreal that you're in that position?
Yes and no. I mean, I think I've always really been interested in I guess solving problems. And like when I was a kid, I used to go to the $2 shop and buy like cell phone faceplates and then list them on the internet and sell them online. And so I think I was literally like 10 years old. I've always had this knack for like, where is there a problem that I can bring a solution to?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I always knew that I would run another business. And I always knew that photography was kind of like a good segue into starting another business.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a really valuable thing for photographers to hear right now, especially in the light of what's going on. Because the beautiful thing about photography is that you can make most of your money sort of in like a small portion of the year. And if you use tools to outsource your editing and streamline your workflow and all of that, actually you can do your work in a reasonably short amount of time, and you've got a whole lot of other time to maybe start working on something else if that's something you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of knew that going into shooting weddings that it would be an avenue or a stepping stone into another kind of business. But I guess I didn't really know what it was at the time until we started working on Narrative.
Fantastic. So blogging obviously is a really difficult thing for a lot of photographers out there, not just myself. So why do you feel blogging is a really important marketing tool for photographers? And do you have any perhaps top tips to make it not seem such a dreaded task?
Our blog drives like huge amounts of leads to our website. So we get 1,000 inquiries a year through the Chasewild website. A large portion, if not most of them, come through SEO, and most of that comes through our blog. So the thing about your blog is, if you're doing SEO right, each and every blog is an opportunity to rank for a different keyword. And within a blog, each and every image is an opportunity to rank for different keywords as well. And so when you use Narrative, it asks you, has a whole feature built into it to help you with your SEO. And I keep calling it Narrative it's publish. I still struggle with that now that we've got 2 products.
Yeah.
So if you use publish will ask you what are your focus keywords, and your focus keywords are essentially like, what do you want to rank for in Google? And so, let's say I photographed, there's a wedding that rank, you can search an Auckland warehouse wedding. This is a wedding that I had photographed a few years ago. And I knew that like this trend of warehouse weddings was kind of on the up. And so when I was building the blog post, I was spending a lot of time thinking about, okay, well, what do I actually want this particular blog to rank for in Google? When people search, what would this, what keywords would they be searching to find a wedding that kind of looks like that? And so you give narrative the focus keywords. So in this case, it would be Auckland warehouse wedding. And it starts to give you feedback about each of the elements within your blog post, your title, your body description, your keywords, your meta description. And it helps you ensure that that you're going to rank well for that term. Or at least it gives you some tips to help you ensure that that's going to happen. And then the next point is that, like, as I said, like each of the images within your photograph are opportunities to rank in Google as well. Because if you get your head inside a bride or a groom who are looking for a photographer, not only are they going to spend some time on Google searching for photography, but generally I think a lot of them spend time just in Google Images as well, searching for inspiration. And so they might just be searching like, New Zealand wedding, or maybe they're searching, cream wedding shoes, or maybe they're searching blue flowers. I don't know, And so ideally so narrative allows you to add keywords to each of the images within a blog post as well. And it's really quick and easy to do that. You can add the same keyword to multiple images, or you just type the keyword in, hit tab, and it will jump you to the next image. And you can quickly add keywords to each of them. And so those are also really great opportunities to rank. And so like another example would be if you search Pinnacle's elopement photographer, I know that in Google image search, then the first image you'll see will be a Chasewild image, and that's those keywords have been added in narrative, and then now it shows up at the very beginning. So I think, that's why blogging has been a really important part of generating new leads for us. And also, obviously, I think it's important to just get your fresh work up on your website. Like you said, you spent a year without getting recent work up. Your blog is also your portfolio. I think it's the best way to think about it. We don't actually call it the blog because I think someone who's landing on your website, they're not looking for a blog; they're looking for your portfolio, or your stories. And so that's what we call it on our website.
I love that, actually. I've not heard anyone use anything other than blog before, but that's a really good point. A blog doesn't necessarily mean anything to a bride and groom. Stories or recent weddings, or as you say, portfolio, I guess draws them in that little bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think when people think of a blog, they think like written words. And I think the only reason photographers are calling it a blog on their website is because they're using the blogging part of WordPress or Squarespace.
Definitely. So obviously from blogging, we've touched briefly on SEO. SEO is so difficult to master, isn't it? I feel like you have to be a whole other professional to be really, really, really good at SEO. It's like you have to take on a whole new career. So do you have any recommendations on some SEO changes that perhaps our listeners could go away and think about making, that would start to make changes to that side of things?
Yeah. So I think, maybe I jumped the gun a little bit there, but the points that I listed in terms of, defining your focus keywords and ensuring that you follow those steps within narrative so that you should rank well for those keywords. The other thing, ensuring that you get SEO, is just making sure that you have backlinks. So if you don't know what a backlink is, it's a link from somebody else's website to your website. SEO, really, if you break down what it is. It's the art of making Google think that your website has more authority than another person's website. And so they're using a bunch of different indicators to sort of like make that decision. But so one of them is like, the more people who are linking to your website, then the more authority it probably has on that particular term. So how do you get backlinks to your website? I mean, we try and send out our photographs to all of the vendors who we've worked with at weddings. You know, at the beginning, it's quite hard getting, you know, some big blog to share your photos, because, you know, they're sharing. They just keep maybe they just keep rejecting your shoots when you send them in. But there might be like a florist or a caterer or something like that who you worked with, and maybe nobody's ever sent them nice photographs, and they're wanting to update their website. And so we would always just send our photos into the different vendors, and we actually have a page on our website which we would send them as well, which basically says like, hey, we've sent you our photos, this is how you this is how you need to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And it just says stuff like, you know, like, don't re-edit them. But it also says, if you're going to put it onto, you're welcome to put it onto your website, but it must have a clickable link through to our website. You're welcome to use it on your social, but it must tag us and so forth. And so that's actually a really simple way to build backlinks, which is much easier than getting, you know, like Together Jan or Magnolia Rouge or Green Wedding Shoes or one of those like big blogs to try and feature your work. That's also a really great way to build backlinks, but a little bit more challenging.
It's like getting people to kind of do your marketing for you, really, isn't it? You know, they're doing a lot of the legwork for you.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, sure. And I think as couples look at those websites, they're probably also going to go, oh, those photos are beautiful as well. But I think from an SEO perspective, it's like getting backlinks is really important. So yeah,
definitely. So we're going to touch briefly back on your wedding side of things. I can imagine you've shot some incredible weddings, ones that will stay with you forever. Is there a particular wedding perhaps that you could tell us about that you think was incredible?
I mean, we have had some pretty out there weddings. There's so many. Cam shot a wedding that had $500,000 budget. I think my favorite wedding I ever photographed was probably this one that I shot in Morocco. It was for a woman who, I guess you would call her sort of like an Instagram influencer, and she'd reached out to me and said, you know, like, would you come to Morocco and shoot the wedding? And it was just like out, basically not quite in the desert, but sort of out in the desert in this beautiful hotel. And they just booked out the whole hotel, and the wedding and the ceremony and the reception happened like along the side of the swimming pool. And we were sitting like underneath the Atlas Mountains under some lights. So I think like, there's actually so many though. Like I've been lucky enough to shoot in the Faroe Islands a whole bunch of times. If you Google Faroe Island wedding photographer, I think I'm still number one.
You're up there.
I don't know. Like I had a wedding that I photographed in China, which was really interesting. Maybe actually it's the wedding I photographed in India, and like we went out into the desert on camels, and they had like elephants that turned up and stuff like that. And
wow.
The wedding went over 4 different days, and it was just like, it's quite lavish, but like it was unreal. And they basically booked out this castle hotel. It was quite big. And each day there was like a different part of the ceremony. And then on the final day, they did like a more traditional wedding with a white dress in an area called Jaisalmer, which is sort of like up in the desert part of India as well, which was quite amazing. So yeah,
definitely, it sounds it. Do you still get that feeling of, oh my God, I get to shoot this? Like where do I even begin? There's just so much to shoot, so much beauty, so much, as you say, lavishness. Do you still get that feeling, or do you think, you know, this is what I do?
I don't know. I think like when I'm working, my head's very much turned on. Like I'm just like, okay, what do I need to get? Um, yeah. I mean, like I still love shooting weddings. It's so much fun. The last wedding I shot was one of the All Blacks here in New Zealand, actually. And like that was just such a funny wedding because it was just a bunch of blokes who just like had a big, like basically just drinking night. But like I think the thing about weddings is that a wedding is kind of like what at least your couple is imagining like the best day of their life, and you get to come along and be part of that and participate there and document it, and that's really cool. And it's always a really special day. And so I think like for me it's not really about like the lavish weddings, it's just about the people I get to hang out with, and I think that's what's really awesome. Yeah,
I guess that links in quite well with your storytelling, doesn't it? Is it more the people and the connection that fires you up at a wedding rather than how much money they've spent?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think, I don't know, like those expensive weddings, like they'll get featured on blogs and stuff like that. But that's not why you do it, right? Like you do it because you love telling the story of this couple who have come together. It's about creating something for them which they can hold on to forever, I guess. And I think the thing that people often say about our work when they, you know, inquire or when they're talking to us is that it just feels like it feels very natural and it feels very organic. And so having a connection with our couples is really important. And that's kind of, for me, the number one thing. So in and through that, I'm able to like help people relax and capture them in a really beautiful way. And I think that's actually the biggest challenge of being a wedding photographer, is like the art of helping a stranger, pretty much a stranger, be completely comfortable in your presence, to just like let all of their walls down and just be themselves. Yeah. So I think that's what it's about for me. Yeah.
I love it. So you've talked before, I've seen in past kind of talks and things about your ideal client. I know you touch a lot on that in your workshops as well. So, I mean, it's a term that you hear a lot in the industry, but I don't think people necessarily hone in and take it all the way down to its core. So how do you recommend people work out even who their ideal client is and then how to attract them?
Yeah. I think for me, like my ideal client is actually just someone whose wedding I really want to be at, you know? People always ask us this at our workshops, like, you know, how do you make sure that you get like, your ideal client? But like for me to do my best work, I need to be really excited to be at that wedding. And, you know, like, flashy details and like lots of money spent doesn't really get me very excited. Like really interesting people who I love being in the company of, who I'm going to have a really great time with, is I guess what gets me excited. And so I think like attracting my ideal client, I mean, what you see when you land on our website is like most of the images are not sort of like your typical like bride standing there in like a really beautiful position, like with their wind blowing in the hair. Like everything's very natural and organic, and someone's probably just like cracking up or laughing or something like that. So I think like first off, we can sort of like initially attract people who are interested in that kind of photography. And then I think when I sit down and meet a client, the question I'm asking myself really is like, am I going to enjoy spending, you know, one of my precious weekend days at this person's wedding? And I think to do that, you just have to be yourself, right? You have to really just be you and see if you connect with them. So, I mean, maybe that's not like really the answer that you're looking for, because I think everyone's like, my ideal client, you know, spends $500,000 on a wedding, and my ideal client has this fancy place. But that's kind of what it is for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think from what you've just said there, I definitely take that, to attract your ideal client, you find what you enjoy in a wedding, and that's what you show in your work. So, you enjoy people's reactions and their relationships together and their emotions throughout the day. So do you show kind of primarily that on your website rather than the big lavish details or things like that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you would have heard of this said before, and people say, show what you want to shoot. And that's really important. I think, if you want to shoot really fancy weddings and you've got no fancy wedding in your portfolio, then you're not going to book anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
People, when they're looking at a website, they're not really looking, or when they're looking at a wedding photography website, they're not really looking at, the photography and going, is this person a good photographer? I think they're looking at the images and they're asking themselves, do I want my wedding to look like this?
Mm-hmm.
And so the content and what is like what's happening in those images, if you want to attract people who have particular kinds of weddings, then like it needs to be in your portfolio. And so we really wanted to shoot like with a lot of couples in the mountains when we were starting out, because that's what we loved to do. And so I remember we had like quite early on a couple who was coming over from Germany, and they were eloping here, and they were like, could we maybe like do the elopement on a beach somewhere in the Coromandel or something like that? And I was like, yeah, we could do that. I've also got this other idea. We could like drive to this volcano, which is like, 5 hours from here, and we could drive up the side of the mountain and do the photo shoot like up there if you wanted. That would be really cool. And they were like, okay, sure. And I was like, don't worry, I'll organize everything. You just like I'll come pick you up from your hotel, basically. I think sometimes you've just got to make it happen as well. Like if there's something that you really want to shoot, it's not that I made this couple have an elopement that they didn't want it. I showed them something that I was really excited about doing, and they were really keen to be part of that, and they absolutely love their photos now. And that was one of the first like really dramatic mountain photo shoots that we did. And after that, we got way more inquiries that were like, we want to do photo shoots in the mountains like that. Yeah. And that's kind of how we, establish that part of the brand, I guess. Yeah.
Like showing people what could be, isn't it? They probably would have never thought of that, never considered even knowing about it. But then just because you suggested, well, this could be an option. They open their minds to a whole other side of things.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So you obviously have a lot of strings to your bow, which I think we've covered already in this interview. But on top of Chasewild, on top of narrative, you also have workshops and presets, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. So we've been running workshops for a few years now, actually. I think we've had a few hundred Kiwis come through our workshops. We've done a few in Australia. We did one in London. I think workshops are awesome. They're heaps of fun. If you haven't done one, go do one. And I would say go do one because you get to meet a whole bunch of other wedding photographers, which is, I think, a really important thing to do. And I think just generally it's a fun day. Like all of ours, we have a photo shoot, and we bring along a styled couple. And for us, it's a big part about sort of helping our workshop attendees build out their portfolios a little bit as well, to get some really beautiful images, because it can be quite hard to nail the perfect shots, on a wedding day. And we've been selling presets for I think a similar time as well. And I think for us, that was just, we spent years and years perfecting our presets. And it was quite interesting, actually, because for us, maybe unlike other brands, we had two people who were kind of like working on this preset. And Cam and I set up this like Dropbox link where our presets were living in this Dropbox folder essentially. And so whenever one of us would like change or improve a preset, it would automatically update on the other person's computer. And so like almost every day we were like slowly adapting and like moving them back and being like, I can change this one so it's like a little bit more, blue or whatever, and it works better in these situations. And so I guess over years and years forward and back of us like perfecting these presets, we're like, look, like we should give other people the opportunity to use these as well. And so we jumped on that bandwagon like many other photographers did, and have sold the presets. And I think it's really cool to see other people using those presets because they have a really unique look and feel to them in the way that they work. They really allow you to like bring the warmth up but maintain a really nice skin tone. And I think we're like quite allergic to that like trend of like super orangey skin tones that's in right now. But yet we really like the warm feeling of like creamy tones. And so that's kind of what our presets look like. Yeah.
Awesome. So we have so many branches that you're involved in. How do you juggle it all? Do you have perhaps some time management skills that you can share with people that are looking to kind of extend out from photography and divert their attention to another business?
Do I have time management skills? I'm trying to think what I can say that's interesting here. I just have a to-do list, and there's like, I'm constantly rejuggling what's on top. I mean, like maybe this is kind of interesting thing to discuss here, but when Cam and I started Chasewild, before it was the photography brand, it was initially just a blog, and we went and visited some of the most influential photographers, or who we thought were some of the most influential photographers in the world, and we just wanted to write stories about them and hear a little bit about how they got into photography. And there was one thing that I noticed that was consistent across all of these really amazing photographers that I'd met, was that they actually just worked really hard. And I was like, for me, it was a little bit of like an awakening maybe. And I was like, okay, so like maybe these guys didn't really like fluke their way in very much. Like they actually have all been working really hard to get to where they have been. And yeah, I guess it's probably fairly similar for us as well. Been pretty determined to create a brand that we're really proud of. And from the outset, we kind of knew, look, we want to shoot like destination work. We want to shoot a lot of work in the mountains in New Zealand. And, we were going to create this brand to do it. And yeah, so I think, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
Do you miss weddings at all? So obviously narrative is taking up a huge amount of your time nowadays. If you're only shooting kind of 5 weddings per season, do you miss being kind of 40 weddings a year in?
I'll tell you what I don't miss. That's losing my weekends. It's, I think actually, I found shooting weddings quite challenging just on your social life. I think you end up being friends with a lot of other wedding photographers because you're traveling and you're away most weekends. But, like the summer is, I don't know, some of the best times of the year. And I was away basically every single weekend throughout the summer or overseas. And I would go traveling. I'd usually overseas for like 4 to 5 months of the year. I would go for a 3-month stint up to Europe and just kind of bounce around and shoot weddings in Europe. My mum is actually based in London, so I would like go and drop a suitcase off at her house and then like either come in and out or just like bounce around to weddings. And that was a really fun time of my life, I guess, in my mid to late 20s, but that's not sustainable. And I think you hear a lot of destination photographers say that, right? Like they have an amazing time like traveling and shooting, and then eventually they all just want to bring it back home again because you can't do that forever.
Yeah.
So I think I've really been enjoying actually just being able to like spend time with my friends here in New Zealand. And yeah, I think that's really important. So.
Love it. Fantastic. So a final question from me. We're going to wrap it up here. Is there one piece of advice that you can give to our listeners, be it personal advice, business advice, that you think it was really important for them to take away today?
I think I think probably the one thing which has been sort of like quite pivotal for me has just been just getting off your butt and like doing the first thing that you can. I think we spend a lot of time like umming and ahhing about like, how do I create a really successful business? And you're too scared to try because you think that maybe you're going to do it wrong. And I think similarly to what I was saying, like what I've seen in a lot of successful photographers is that they work really hard. And what I've also seen is that they've tried a lot of things that didn't work as well. And so did we. We spent like sometimes days building out like different ideas that we had, well, not more than days, which just never sort of went anywhere. And so I think, building a successful company means a whole lot of like trying things, getting rejected, seeing them not work, and then picking yourself up again and then trying the next thing. And that's what's really like tiring and exhausting about it. But also like every now and then like something will latch on and it will work for you. And so I think that would be like my main piece of advice, which is just like, don't think too much about like stressing about what you're going to do next. Just start trying things.
Just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, it has been an inspiring conversation. I've absolutely loved chatting with you, James. Thank you so much for making the time for us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I will look forward to speaking to you really soon.
Of course. Thanks, Sally.
No problem. Thank you again.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, guys, that's it from me today. Thank you so much to James for joining us and sharing all of his knowledge and tips for the industry. For the show notes or a link to his website, you can head over to www.studioninja.co/episode 7. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NinjaCast, brought to you by Studio Ninja. Beautifully designed and super easy to use, Studio Ninja will help you manage your leads, clients, shoots, invoices, contracts, workflows, and so much more. To learn more or start your 30-day free trial, go to www.studioninja.co.